Did you know that more than 80% of false alarms are related to preventable user errors, such as open windows or pets? Any motion can trigger an alarm. Thousands of police patrol hours are wasted investigating alarm reports that turn out to be false alarms. That's crime-fighting time lost. Make sure your alarm is working properly.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lamert Park. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
I need to ask for this.
How are you? Good morning. Today is Tuesday, March 5th, 2013. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Orden, Mack, Bernardino, Druyan, and Saltzman are present, and we have a quorum. Madam President?
Thank you. We will begin, as always, with Commission comments. Are there any Commission comments?
Madam President, last night I attended the Valley Glen Neighborhood Council, and it was good to see so many people involved in their community, both that are on the council and people who are in the audience participating. And also in attendance were Senior Lead Officers Underwood and Larson, and they were very generous of their time. I think they were there for at least an hour or more, I think, talking to people about their concerns in the community. And I think, our officers' participation with these neighborhood councils and other things, I think, is a great way for interaction between the department and the community. And I was very pleased to see that. And actually, it was quite a nice event.
Yes, thank you very much. The report of the Executive Director. I'm sorry, the report of the Chief of Police.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'll begin my report as I usually do on crime. Crime continues to be down for the first couple of months in the city of Los Angeles. Homicides are down 27%. Rapes are down 34%. Robberies are down 12.6%. Aggravated assaults are down 12.7%. Total violent crime reduction so far compared to last year is just under 14%. Property crime is also down in every category. Total property crime reduction is 9.5%. Shootings are down in the city. Incidents of shots fired is down 8%. Incidents of victims shot is down 15.8%. All of our bureaus are enjoying crime reductions as compared to last year. And attacks on police officers are down. Officer-involved shootings are down. And gang-related crime in particular, we're having great success. Homicides are down 41% as compared to last year. And overall gang crime down 20.3%. So a really good start for the year. Obviously, we have much more of the year to go, but it's an excellent start. Deployment, sworn and civilian personnel statistics, we have 9,978 sworn personnel on payroll, plus 39 recruits who are not yet on payroll in the academy. That gives us a total of 10,017 sworn officers. 272 level 1 reserves, 21 level 2s, 128 level 3s, just over 1,000 volunteers. Civilian personnel staffing, we have 2,861 civilian personnel assigned and 486 civilian vacancies, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Following through on last week's meeting when you gave us an update on the investigation of matters related to the Dorner tragedies, I think, as you said, the Inspector General will be brought along with the report as it comes along. And I think also, I just wanted to say, as we had talked about assigning a couple of commissioners, that I will assign Commissioners Mack and Druyan as contact people as the investigation goes forward.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The report of the Inspector General.
Good morning. I have no report this morning, but I do have a correction to make on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did say Inspector General in error.
I'm
and so this
sorry.
is now the report of the
Of the
Executive
Executive.
Director.
Yes. And the correction is to item 10A3. The correct OIS number should be 026-12.
All right. Thank you. I don't think we need to vote on that.
No.
And I just
had to
appreciate the
put that on the
correction.
record.
And now we will have the report on the Inspector General.
Nothing to report. Thank you, Madam President.
All right. Number 5 is information only of the filed items. Noise variance permits on file as submitted on March 1st, 2013. The details on those permits can be seen in the full agenda files. Also, the special event permit files, they're submitted as to the period ending March 1st, 2013. We have only 2, including the 20th annual Cesar Chavez March for Justice. Presentations today?
No presentations.
Thank you. The consent agenda items, we have consent agenda items A through L today. May I hear a motion?
I move approval of consent agenda items A through L.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. Today we have the regular agenda items. We have the DNA quarterly report, A, which I believe we wish to hear. We have B, department's report relative to community caretaking doctrine. And C, continued from the February 26th agenda, the bias policing update. And so with that, I think we will start with A, and that is the department's report related to the DNA quarterly report. Good morning.
Chief. The fourth quarterly report, I'd like to say we've come up quite a bit with the EPIMS project. This was probably the last recommendation that the Controller's Office had recommended we get something that would be able to accurately track our kits. To date, our RFP has gone out. We have had a return of 7 vendors that have responded. We are actively reviewing these vendor proposals for possible selection, and our stakeholders that are on the evaluation team consists of our property division, our ITA, our ITB, SID definitely, as well as RHD. We also, in December, had and actually I'm bringing up the issue of the mail thorough output program, which has definitely increased our return on our kit returns. Right now we're sitting at about once a kit gets in, our return rate is better than 120 days. We have nothing past 120 days to date. With backlog finished, we've definitely come a long ways from 2008.
I noticed also that you have been able to increase your internal you and reduce your contracting out.
That's right. If you notice, the report shows that we only spent roughly $93,000 on contracting out, and that's significantly lower than it has been over the last several years. So we are coming through with our goal to start doing them mostly in-house. We're very, very near that.
And what about the two, let's see, you had two remaining unfrozen positions that are going through the process. Where are we now in that interview process?
We are still waiting for unfreezes. The committee that handles that only meets periodically through the year. So we have to time it to hit that meeting. But every time they've given us an unfreeze, we've hired everybody that they've allowed us to.
Any comments or questions? Well, it's an excellent report, and as you said, it's a very long way from 2008, and a very good thing for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I forgot Detective Blocker, Robbery Homicide Division. Thank you.
And Yvette Burney from SID.
And is there a motion?
Move approval of regular agenda item 8A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's approved. Thanks again. B, this is from the Chief of Police, the update on the caretaking, doctoring, and vehicle impound procedures.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Chief. This is an update of the community caretaking doctrine and vehicle impound procedures that relate to the implementation of Special Order Number 7, April 10th, 2012. It was really created to create a standard application of impound authorities, which it did, but at the same time it created a whole bunch of authorities, which appears to be creating a little bit of confusion on the part of the officers. We're unable to attribute any real impact of traffic collisions as it relates to Special Order Number 7. But impounds are down 39%. But this follows a year prior to the implementation of Special Order 7 when it went down 18%. So it was trending down anyway. However, we do believe that some of the decrease was attributable to Special Order Number 7. There are some training issues. We did an assessment, actually, of officers in the field on what they're confused about so that we can develop a training program to address that. And basically, they were around the areas of agency holds for holding for evidence or driver arrested, the clarification with regard to impound for 30 days versus early release, the 14602 authorities versus the 22651P authorities, the completion of the vehicle impound form, the issue of foreign licenses and proper identification. The officers tend to default to impounding for 22651P because afraid of making mistakes, afraid of the 14601 hold for 30 days. Properly handling of dealer plates, reading of DMV printouts, that really relates to whether there's a misdemeanor conviction for a non-licensed driver, 12500A, reading the DMV printout, and then training on impounding for evidence hold, arrest hold, etc. So there is Office of Administrative Services and the Training Division is in the process of developing this training. We've done the needs assessment already so that the officers aren't confused. And we developed charts and other resources from which they could use to guide them when they're in the field to make these arrests.
Chief, I just want to look at the statistics for a moment. To me, the main issue is to make sure that the impound policy, the change to the impound policy, has not had any adverse impact on public safety, particularly with respect to the traffic accidents. And I look at the statistics, and I note that the hit-and-run traffic collisions are down slightly. And it would seem to me that probably those are the ones that might be most impacted by having unlicensed drivers who flee the scene. And the fatal and severe injury traffic collisions are up slightly. And my question is there any way for the department to determine with respect to either of those two categories whether an unlicensed driver was involved in the accident? And to do a comparison in particular between 2011 and 2012. And my concern is not whether there are some. There may very well be, but the question is it increasing and therefore having an adverse impact on public safety as a result of the policy change?
Yeah, that is the focus of a much bigger analysis and also a comparison between other major cities of similar terrain and urban environments that we're doing now. For example, this statistic that was published in the LA Weekly, the comparison of that 47% of our hit-and-run traffic collisions, of the total traffic collisions, 47% in LA are hit-and-runs, as compared to a national statistic of 11%. So why is that? And of the 47%, we only have 8% that are filed. That means we only have enough evidence to file on 8% of those. So even of the 8%, how many were non-licensed drivers? That's the subject of this bigger analysis that we're digging into right now.
Okay, yeah, because you could do that then from year to year, presumably have roughly 8%.
Correct.
The larger question, which I think is obviously an important question as to why we have more than other cities, doesn't seem to me to be directly related to the impound policy issue.
No.
That was before us last
Because that
year.
was even before the impound policy took place, correct?
So I just at some point would like to see that analysis to determine whether or not there has been an increase in either hit and run or fatal traffic accidents involving unlicensed drivers. And if there was a significant increase, we might want to take a look at that impound policy. But if it's consistent with these numbers, then I would conclude that the impound policy is not having an impact.
Correct. We will do that in short order.
Chief, I certainly support the report and the recommendations. I would be interested in having, and maybe this is in Chief MacArthur's arena, but in terms of the training aspect, I would like to maybe have, perhaps not this morning, but at some date in the not-too-distant future, sharing an outline of the methodology in terms of how this training is going to be implemented. I mean, I certainly think that it's apparently well thought out and certainly can go a long way toward hopefully eliminating the confusion that you talked about that some of the officers have experienced in terms of all these, in some ways, competing and conflicting laws and that you have to live with. But I guess what I'm really getting at, and I know we're in an age, we're a sophisticated age, all kinds of technology and all the rest of the stuff, but I think there needs to be some, in terms of the implementation, some hands-on, direct hands-on kind of training to make absolutely sure that that the officers are clear and fully understand the clarification that you're seeking to achieve here.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. We can give them charts and documents to read, but it does need to be reinforced with some creative training, apps on iPhones, apps on MDCs. Dr. Luann Pinnell's here. We talked about creative methods to approach this, so we're very focused on it, Commissioner.
And we can have the training side of the house come in. We'll schedule that. That's not a problem. I think the Commission got briefed a little bit on the training when this originally went through. One of the things that we do want to look at is to see if this change in policy has had the desired effect. And the desired effect is to create more responsible drivers in Los Angeles, as the Commission will remember. So has that happened? Are we running into more drivers that, while they are still unlicensed, have insurance? Are we running into more drivers that, while they are unlicensed, have identification? Are we experiencing a change in hit and run with people that are unlicensed? So these are, remember, this policy is just under a year old, so it takes a while for it to have the kind of effect on the driving public that we want. So we'll continue to study this. We're going to put in some more metrics to get at the core of whether this is changing driver behavior, and we'll continue to report to the Commission, because our goal is to make roads safer in Los Angeles, and that's what the intent of this policy was.
Yeah, and on that same note, even before the policy was implemented, we met with several community groups about this, and there's a community accountability piece as well, and that is, what work can you do to ensure that people at least now have identification and also have insurance? And so we're reaching out to those communities to ask, we've implemented this is our result. Now, can you tell us what you've done to hold your end of the bargain up?
Chief, Chief, what are you, I couldn't find it in the report. What are you defining as a hit-and-run traffic collision?
Somebody that causes a traffic collision and leaves the scene.
Would that include parked vehicles or?
Yes.
Oh, so this could be someone hitting some. Listen. Go ahead. Okay. So that could assume someone hitting someone in a parking lot and driving off.
It could be, and that's why there are different standards for reporting between cities. So that 47% number we have could be an inflated number.
That's what I'm trying to get at. First, I think I'm following Commissioner Druyan's comments. Between 2011 and 2012, the numbers they vary so small to be statistically insignificant. I don't know if you're going to, with all due respect, I don't know if you're going to be able to come up with anything because the numbers are too small. Maybe a few years out, you might have something.
It could be. Yeah, we will try though. We'll dig into this and do as much analysis as we can.
And we wouldn't expect to get an immediate result in it from a change in policy at a government level to a change in behavior at an individual level. There is lag time. This is it's not just a matter of changing the policy and expecting an immediate result here. So we would anticipate lag time, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that completely. But what I do notice is there's a big difference between hit-and-run traffic collisions in 2008 and 2012. To me, that looks like improvement from 2008. And I'm wondering, what are we doing, or what have we done, or did we have any impact on that?
Well, we had a 1% decrease from 2011 to 2012.
Well, I meant 2008 to 2012.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a big decrease, yeah.
It is?
It is.
So are we doing something different now than we were doing in 2008? And maybe we should do more of that.
Yeah. Enforcement, education, and...
Well, there's so many things. It's miles, when you look at traffic accidents, the first thing you look at is miles driven. And so miles driven in the LA basin is controlled largely by gas prices, largely by a number of things. So you have to overlay all of this with miles driven, and then you got to look at, it's not just the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department that affect this stuff. So while we have had it trending down, and we're proud of that, I don't know that you can necessarily attribute it to the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department.
Could it just be economics?
Well, economics, miles driven, a reduction in pieces of the population relative to their driving habits, things like that.
As Commissioner Druyan just said, too, we don't know what 207 was. 2008 might have been a blip. So I guess that's partially why we need this detailed study, so that we can really get some answers.
It's not on the chart, but 207 is consistent. There's not that much there.
Yeah, that was my concern, too, because I saw the same article, the 47% article, in terms of hit and runs, and that's why I was wondering is, what do we define as a hit and run? Because to me, a hit and run is you're on a thoroughfare street, you hit someone, versus something, a parking lot, fender bender, which, although it's it's a problem for the individuals. It's not as great a danger to public safety. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. What are we using and what are other people using? Because that number is huge if it's...
It's not so much, and you're right, but kind of at a different level. When a minor property damage accident occurs in the city of Los Angeles with no injuries, the only thing that will generate a report is if it's a hit and run. In other words, if that occurs and the person leaves a note or meets up with the owner and says, "Hey, I backed into your car and sorry, and my insurance will cover it," that's not a traffic report. Now, in many municipalities, it is. Particularly Midwestern insurance, where insurance companies keep their home bases. Everything's a traffic accident. So it's always, you got to always look for apples to apples when making these comparisons. That was one of the issues we had with the weekly article. But that report's coming to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
And do you have an estimate for us of when we'll have that report?
Within a month.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right. I think it's important because those figures keep getting repeated in other places as well, and we just need to know what the real figures are.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move approval of the Chief's report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
It's approved. We are moving then on to C.
Thanks, Mike.
No public comment.
You might have got gas prices, gas price, all this stuff. Miles driven and whatever.
This is our annual report, 2012, on bias policing.
Good morning. My name is Commander Rick Webb. I'm the Commanding Officer of Internal Affairs Group. And as the report states that typically we report on a quarterly basis. However, at the end of the year, we started reporting on a annual, to give you some annual numbers, and then also there's a 3-year data in there available as well. Just to capture a summary, there were this last year in 2012, and keeping in mind that those are cases that are closed in 2012, so some of those cases could have been generated in 2011, but our data capture system works around cases closed. But anyway, last year there were 266 personnel complaints where there had at least one allegation of bias policing that were closed, and inside those complaints there were 486 allegations of bias policing. So that could mean a couple of things. There could be 2 people who made the complaint against one officer, or more likely it could be one complaint against 2 officers or more, which would ultimately result in one complaint investigation, but multiple allegations contained in that particular complaint. Now, by way of history, in 2011 there were 249 complaints, whereas, as I said, last year there were 266. And so, but with a 3-year average, there's about 253 personnel complaints generated every year with regard to bias policing. The 2012 data represents 6.4% increase in complaints for 2012 compared to 2011. And the one statistic that I always think is interesting and report repeatedly is that of the 266 complaints that were generated or that were closed last year, only 7, which is just really minuscule, involves some sort of allegation of ethnic remark. And that certainly ties into the training that is taking place with regard to what I call essentially the relational aspects of policing, on how to avoid these types of things, because I've always said it's more of an issue of respect than it is of ethnicity. But in any event, as I mentioned here, almost half, 42% of personnel complaints where there's one allegation of bias policing involves an allegation of discourtesy. As the Commission's aware, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, we're allowed to, at Internal Affairs, to stop making recommendations to the chain of command with regard to adjudication of the bias policing cases. And that would make that consistent with all other adjudications of personnel complaints. I don't think that there's any indicator in this data really, because again it's on cases closed, so most of those cases have yet to be closed, but there has been a slight drop on the, you may recall that we looked at the unfounded usually versus the not resolved allegations and how those ultimately were adjudicated. But of all bias policing allegations, 82.5% were classified as unfounded, and the 3-year average is at right around 81%. So we're actually kind of getting down to that particular average. The data appears relatively, at least to me, it appears relatively constant over time for the 3 years that we had examined. The benefit of focusing on constitutional policing seems to be in the best interest, or the best benefit really is on the examination and the I'd say embedding of the chief's goal of constitutional policing. I think that looking at constitutionality of every impact or every contact we have on the department from the lens of constitutionality have made certainly officers more competent across the board with regard to the constitutionality of what they do. And when I say constitutionality, I mean search and seizure, and specifically in detentions. In the future, we are actively pursuing mediation as a goal. We're looking at some white papers to get some grant funding. Hopefully we can renew discussions with the Police Protective League to implement this, because there's some things that will have to take place. But from an internal affairs standpoint, I think we just have to maintain vigilance. We have to monitor adjudications, most certainly. And as you know, we did stop doing the recommendations, so I think we have to certainly monitor that one particular piece of data as well. So pretty much everything's static, I'd say, over 3 years.
Okay. Dr. Luann Pennell, Director of Police Training from Police Training and Education. On the training side, we did an assessment at the end of last year and looked at, we had multiple competing training demands, particularly the post 24 hours of required mandated training that they were required to take by the end of the year. So we recognized at the beginning of the year we were short. South Bureau had completed their training last year, and the assessment for February 1st was given to have all the information inputted so that we could assess where we are at. But there was an extension given to March 22nd for having the completion. So right now we're looking at a 50 to 60%, depending on the Bureau, level of completion, and we are expecting that by March 22nd we would have that completed or almost completed. The information that we've received, again, with February 1st, after February 1st, kind of all inputting and training management came to a halt until after the Dorner situation concluded. And so we're kind of reassessing, and ideally we'll have that, we can get that back to you once we have those final audit requirements completed.
Thank you. I appreciate my colleagues continuing this since I was away last week. And I appreciate the presentation very much. This is a topic we've been talking about for some time, and clearly a tremendous amount of progress has been made. Tremendous amount of effort's been put in. I think the department deserves a lot of credit for the progress, the change in approach, the seriousness with which it's taking the issue, and I want to make sure we acknowledge that. I do have just a couple questions, and they relate to things that each of you have already spoken about, but I'd like to understand just a little bit better. On the training issue, the report on the first page talks about completion deadline will be set for the end of April 2013. Dr. Pennell, I understood you just talk about a March 22nd. Are those the same?
Well,
talking about the same thing, or are those different things?
We're talking about the same thing. Okay. Generally, whenever we hit the final date, we realized we had to capture some people who either moved, were off on sick and IOD, so then we kind of collect the rest. So we want to make sure that we completely cover this topic. The other thing I would mention is, while this is the specific course we're tracking, I think I've mentioned to you before that we continue to infuse these concepts throughout all of our training. Whether or not it has it in the title, we want to ensure that we're doing constitutional policing throughout our training. So I think that's also a companion to the results that Commander Webb is talking about.
Thank you. And so you're reasonably confident then that by April, roughly, we will have completed this?
Yes.
And I appreciate your raising the point about infusing the training. I know that's true, and I've seen it in the academy. But I also think for officers that are not going through the academy right now, clearly we want to make sure that they're as familiar with the policy as they can be. The other question, Commander Webb, which relates to the adjudication issue. I guess I'm trying to understand, based on the change, when you would project we will be able to see whether that's having an effect or not. I understand it's too soon, but do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, typically it takes personnel complaint investigations about a year to go through the system and ultimately to end up on this report. And because just the mere definition of what a closed investigation is can even be confusing, because what we do before we close an investigation, if there's any other ancillary issues out of there, if there's any missing documents, so I have a team of people that literally do nothing but close these cases out. And so until all of that is done, the case isn't closed. So it takes about a year to get that done. Certainly we could monitor that every quarter to see how that number tracks, but I would say a year would really be the benchmark to see what the impact of that decision was.
Thank you.
And pardon me for interrupting you, but just on that same point, I would, in addition to having the IAG monitor it, I would like for the Inspector General to also independently monitor on some basis, keeping in mind Commander Webb's comments about the timing, maybe at least on a 6-month basis or some reasonable period of time where there would be sufficient statistical data to look to really see if indeed if it's working the way that we've envisioned that it would work.
I certainly agree, Commissioner Mack. I was going to ask the Commission President, when on the assumption we're going to approve this, that I would make a motion to specifically ask the Inspector General to review both of those issues, to give us status maybe in 3 months about what's happening with the training, because by then that should have been done, and then give us a sense of the timing, its review of the adjudication protocol, and then what the appropriate timing is for Inspector General review. I agree. I think I have every confidence that this is moving in the right direction, but I think it would make sense for us to hear that from the Inspector General.
And just, if I may, there was one I noticed when the chart where you talk about adjudication, I didn't see a line item dealing with whether or not there were any sustained complaints. I don't know if that was an omission or what was an oversight on my part, but I looked a couple of times, and I think my vision is still reasonably good.
I think your vision is excellent.
Page 4 of 8.
Yes, there is not a sustained level there. I think when you add up all of the different aspects there, they probably do come up to 100%.
They do, yeah.
So I think it would be appropriate on the chart to specifically have a sustained, and even if it does come out to be 0.
I get it. Okay. So add the column or the row of sustained.
And I think particularly, the adjudication is obviously a very important part of it, and to be able to see that, I think, is important. And particularly since some of these complaints are discourtesy, I agree with you that it's very good to see the racial remarks reduced, but we still have a significant number of discourtesy, with none found to be sustained.
One question. Commander Webb, do you have any sort of a timetable on when you're going to be able to start doing some mediations?
Well, there's a lot of issues wrapped around that. There wasn't total support throughout the entire system for that. As you know, when we had the whole consent decree issue going, so there was not, that just wasn't working at that time. It's a little bit more of a complicated system in that it's going to require some agreements with the Protective League and maybe other unions, because what will happen is that we have a bunch of different versions of what we call a team's report, an officer's report that has the disciplinary history and qualification and that type of stuff. And so the question becomes, if we have a personnel complaint that is ultimately mediated, how does that reflect on the an officer's team's report, and under what circumstances can it be used? Can you use it to examine when somebody's being promoted? Is it considered, can we use it for pattern of conduct? Those types of things. And so there's various iterations of that report as well. So when somebody is being examined, say by Internal Affairs, that will have every piece of data on that officer, whereas if somebody's going in for an interview for lieutenant or sergeant or whatever, certain information is not on there. For example, unfounded complaints and those types of things. So getting down to into the weeds, you might say, with the unions is going to take a little bit of time, because we have to go line by line and figure, okay, under what circumstances can this be used? What happens if we have, we go to mediation, all of a sudden an allegation of serious misconduct emerges out of that, and do we caucus after that, and how do we do that? The other thing, not to be long-winded, but the other thing is creating a system that will support that, because it's like I tell people, I can cook a dinner for 2 people, but I can't cook it for 200 people, and that's really kind of the situation here at LAPD. We're talking about a very large a large organization with a lot of data, so we'd have to literally change, I think, our complaint management system to support the mediation. So we have to come up with a framework of how we envision this happening and how we implement it, how do we report it. And then also, I think the one part that we do have down relatively well is some entities to do the mediation, which we've talked before, and then they've had a change in leadership over at the City Attorney's Office mediation, the dispute resolution program. But there's going to have to be a training component for the people there as well. So I would think, best case scenario, now that we're going to restart, I would say 6 months out. That would be very optimistic. The other thing, too, the desire is, I've seen other studies from other organizations, and they've mediated 6 complaints, 7 complaints, and those aren't even really complaints that, the officer was wearing sunglasses and I didn't like him wearing sunglasses type mediation. And so we're talking about a pretty large number. I would estimate probably 25 or 30% of these would be eligible and possibly be mediated. And so what the desire is to marry up with a university, with a researcher, to really study the efficacy of our mediation efforts and community impact, officer impact, change in behaviors, those types of things. So we're currently working on, as I said, some grant funding for that as well. So this is a very, very large project, and just with everything involved, I think 6 months would be very optimistic.
Well, excuse me, I may just pick up on that point, and Commander Webb, and I certainly appreciate all of the things you've just stated, and I know that we basically put it on hold for for reasons that we all understand. But now that we're sort of getting rewound, so to speak, and recognizing that that there will have to be agreement reached with the Protective League around some of the issues you've just talked about. But I'm reflecting back to those work groups that you facilitated, or at least had facilitated, that involved all kinds of stakeholders, including representatives from the Police Protective League, as well as ACLU and a wide range of other groups in between. Were not some of these issues, or at least in concept, was there some tentative potential meeting of the minds?
Yes, sir.
These issues. So I mean, it's not as though we have to start from totally from scratch, right?
Right. In fact, we have a shell of a memorandum of understanding with us and the possibly the city attorney, and we have not had the discussions with them, but we have like you say, a starting point for that. We've also had discussions with the union. The good thing about this, it was kind of odd. We had some people who just couldn't, not in the group, but outsiders looking in, and they just could not understand why. I think the implementation of this, there's really no barriers. There was only one barrier to it, but for the most part, everybody, the unions, management, the community, there's nobody that didn't want to see this happen because the benefits are real obvious. So I don't think there's going to be the wranglings that sometimes you might have to do for some tougher labor relations type issues. I think the benefits for everybody this is just a no-brainer, quite frankly.
Dr. Cornell, I do have one question. In terms of all of this additional data that we have now, has this been helpful in terms of training in order to target certain areas?
Absolutely. Just having all the information, we know as we put new trainings come together all the time, and not just the academy training for our in-service training, and we just continually look for those areas of linkages so that we can reinforce it in multiple trainings. So yes, it has been very helpful.
Is there a motion?
I would move approval of item 8C, and in addition, I'd like to request that the Inspector General report back to the board in 3 months to give us a status on a current status on the following: the training issue we've discussed, the adjudication protocol we've discussed, and the mediation issue that we've discussed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is public comment period?
Yes, Madam President, we have four.
Thanks, Rick.
We have Annie Hall, followed by Michael Hunt, Daniel Jones, and Iman Misha-Atri.
Same thing I got. Good, same thing I got.
Oh, yes. Oh, take
Good morning. I'm Annie Hall, and I'm just here this morning to actually the LAPD for allowing me to get my house back, my possessions, and the cars, and to compensate us for the 3 years that me and my family been out homeless. Also allowing me to have the criminal charges taken off of my police record, and for a full investigation involving me and my witnesses and our evidence, and to have it recorded. Also, I want to thank Chief Beck because of him saying that he is not going to tolerate racism and police misconduct and corruption coming out of any of the departments. And also, I want to thank the LA Police Commissioners for helping me as well, John Mack, and the excellent job that y'all are doing here in LA. But when the agencies do not back you up and do what they're supposed to do, they undermine you and they make it look like you are the bad guys. So this is the problem with what I see. I had continuously dealt with the Internal Affairs and the Inspector General Office, and they refused to help. And the color of my skin should not matter. And this is what the problem. Southwest Police Department is really corrupt and a very racist police department. They are dividing the community. I've been in the community ever since I was 15 years old. Lived in the same house for 40 years. I knew the area.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hunt?
Good morning. First of all, I want to say thanks, Chief Beck's office, for this transparency at the Venice Pacific Division. We went into meetings, we got it all together. I think it was a difference of opinion. I really want to say transparency is the key. The call from Chief Beck's office to the Pacific Division got the ball rolling and got meetings taken care of, and we got settled and everything. So I think we all got a better understanding what the community want, and that's thanks to you for the transparency, Chief Beck. Also, what I want to say about the complaints are based on respect. The guy said it the best, the chief, or the guy who said it. If you respect the people, then that's when you get less complaints. And if you listen and you have some kind of transparency, that's the difference between management and the officers. The training needs to start at the officers level so they can have transparency and they can see and be a part of the community so that they can understand what the community goes through. And once you create transparency with the officers on the bottom level, then it works out for everybody. You get less complaints. 75% of your complaints will go away. The respect is a great issue, and once you understand, just because you can don't mean you do, and things like that. Upper management understands that, but the officers at that level don't understand it. So once you create transparency with those officers in training, that's when you get the police department all the way around. And then with the Dorner situation, anybody that's being deployed and come back from Kuwait or anything needs to sit down at a desk for 6 months and go through psychotherapy and make sure that they're all right before they go back out in the field. And that's professional advice. They need to go back through, sit down at the desk and go through professional training and see a psychotherapist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I know where I am. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Daniel Jones. For 45 years, my father made donations to the Retired Police Officers Association for the state of California. He also made donations to every homeless shelter in the state. Last week at Sheriff Baca, I walked up to his face honorably and told him the same thing I told you, Chief. He failed his loyalty test on October 1st at 10:31 p.m. in year of our Lord 2011. That's all I said. I didn't grind it, but I said it to his face. I'm the one person when it comes to this Constitution right here that you can't fool all the time about anything, okay? There it is there. This is constitutional law right here. State Title Code 2, state militia. Unorganized state militia consists of all persons liable for service in the state militia. All persons liable for service. All male citizens, able-bodied, who declare their intentions to become citizens of the United States who are between the ages of 18 and 45. Violation of martial law, anybody who participates in a rebellion, turmoil, insurrection, or allowing one to happen is violation of martial law. Failure to respond to is called a desertion, punishable by 3 years in prison and $50,000 fine. This is the threat, sir. The Honorable Senator John McCain needs to get back into the Senate and retract those 2 paragraphs for military rendition. That's 1 foot coming down on the people of this country. That's a broken contract with the people. Thank you.
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Well, I appreciate it, but I'm not in agreement with my colleague, Michael Hunt. I cannot praise the department under your direction, Chief Charlie Beck. I'd like to recommend a shift in paradigm or shift in assessment of culpability. I know for a fact that L.A. CAN has been responsible for submitting in excess of 300 police complaints, and not one has been resolved in favor of the victim. Each one has been unfounded. In other words, the officers have gone not admonished. I find the 300 to 400 plus complaints from the constituency can't all be erroneous. As with Chris Donner, I don't understand why he was released from his duty if he was a witness to inappropriate acts. Why wouldn't a police officer be prosecuted, penalized, or further investigated? As with the profiling, which is racist, not just biased, I have many friends who have been beaten by multiple police officers and then falsely charged with assault on the police officer. I have many friends. Most of them are African American males. Okay, this transference of guilt and culpability should stop. So you're instead of investigating and prosecuting the culpable officers, you're incriminating the whistleblowers and the victims. I've been a victim of transference of guilt also and culpability. Assaulted, sexually harassed, stalked by white females, and then the reversal of the culpability, I guess so that you don't have to prosecute or so that you don't have to find culpable white females. Is it that Caucasian or white people are trying to go back to a system or recreate a system where you can perpetrate at will and then falsely accuse or find culpable, transfer guilt onto the whistleblowers who expose your corruption?
Thank you. Your time is up.
So, you need to investigate the culpable officers and not find the victims responsible.
2 minutes is completed.
That is the final card, Madam President.
We are now at recess in order to go into closed session for 3 items which are listed in your agenda.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items numbers 10A, 1, 2, and 3 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Testing the very definition of their motto, to protect and to serve the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department. Standing tall in the thin blue line that protects us all, they wear many hats. They willingly assume their duties as fighters of crime, as investigators, and